I'll let Debbie go ahead and tell you a little bit about herself and what she's planning.
I'm Deborah Dawson. I'm a watercolor artist. I'm from O'Brien, which is just over the border in Oregon. I live up in the mountains there, and I have a studio that is actually kind of a studio gallery, and people are welcome to stop by if they give me a call and make an appointment. My favorite subject at the moment is nature, and has been actually for a long time, and I've been focusing on moving water for the last probably, well, since March, and I've taught several workshops on it. We certainly live in an area where moving water is everywhere, and it's so beautiful, and I enjoy teaching. And this particular subject is going to be a winter stream, and it's coming down out of the mountains. The photo was taken over by Fort Jones, which is in it's in Northern California, over by Wairika, the Wairika area. Okay. This is a photograph that's been blown up, and I taught a workshop Friday, and this was a photograph that one of my students actually brought. She and her husband, who's passed, had taken this picture many years ago, and I just loved it. It's a little bit different type of rocks and so forth than the ones that we have around here. And this is a nice subject because it's got a lot of depth to it, and it has the photograph itself has a lot of lights and darks, and the subject being moving water. One of the things I like to say is that you have to think about the container as much as you would if you were drawing a vase of water with flowers in it. You have something that contains the water. So the banks and the environment around the river or the creek is just as important as the water. And some of the times, I can remember when I was in college. I have a degree in art from Southern Oregon College. It's now a university. I used to go down to Lithia Creek, which is in Ashland. And one of the things that I enjoyed doing was drawing the outline of the creek in a contour study rather than focusing on the rocks. And if you go out and decide to draw a creek, you might want to try that because it helps you get the perspective. A lot of people don't realize that perspective also plays a big part of moving water. But it also helped create an interesting outline of the creek. You know, anybody can draw the one-point perspective type of thing, but if you go out and actually draw the perspective or the contour lines of the creek, it gives it a lot of character. And this particular subject has a lot of white water, and white water has, when you look at it, you think that it's just white, but then you realize that in order to give that form, you have to also create a volume to it, and the way you do that is by adding color. And creeks and rivers take on a lot of the coloring of the rocks that are around it and the impurities that are in the soil. And the higher up and the more rocky it is, the whiter the water appears. But of course, as an artist, we're going to take artistic license, and we're going to help create the feeling that it's not just flat, that it has some perspective to it. I wanted to show with the paintings up above very quickly just some different varieties of moving water. There's a waterfall coming down off of a cliff right up here, and that's actually from a black and white photograph that I took over in on the Chattanooga River between Tennessee and North Carolina. And this is a painting of a creek. I wanted to show moving water that wasn't as rambunctious as rapids, and it also shows the container, the underneath side, of the rocks coming up through the water. And I have a lot of these kinds of creeks around my house. And the rest of these paintings are just off of photographs that I have taken of the Illinois or the Smith River, or some of the creeks that go into the Smith River. So, what I'm working on here today is 140-pound Winsor Newton. Is that in the right spot? Okay. And it's cold press. Sometimes working on rough is better when you're working with water, and that's because you can drag your brush and you can get some highlights that way. You can still do it on 140-pound cold press. You just have to get used to abusing your brush a little bit. And my brushes, I always set some brushes aside for that kind of abuse. And they're the ones that I've used religiously over, a year or two, and they're a little rough on the edges. What I've done on this painting today is I've started filling in some of the background. And the reason I did that is because in order to cover this adequately today, I wanted to start on the background, just get a head start on that. And right now what I'm going to do is I've taken a mixture of colors. My favorite colors for doing backgrounds are ultramarine blue. I use a little bit of quinacridone gold or burnt orange, Prussian blue, and sometimes I will add some permanent rose in there. And I also like cerulean blue. It's a nice water color. Right now I'm just doing a wash over the top of the trees to set them back. I don't want them to pop so much. So by going ahead and painting the negative space around the trees and leaving it to dry, I'm able to do this.
So you don't have any miscut on there?
I have no miscut on there. Now, using a mask, a liquid mask, is very appropriate when you're doing water or trees or anything like that. But I feel that at some point you should be able to try to do it without also, because I mean it's just kind of a challenge. So it's kind of fun. And I'm going to actually go over this whole background area. It just needs to be fairly dramatic, and this is just the first layer, so.
Deborah?
Yes.
Would you look at the television screen?
Well,
When you lean to the left, your head obscures the screen.
Okay, so.
No, you don't have to bend that far away, but just a little bit.
I'll tell you when it,
Okay.
I was getting ready to move the camera.
Do you want me to change your water?
No, actually, I'm not afraid of having water that's got a little bit of tint to it. Is that better?
Just like that is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, good. Now, this half of the painting over in this corner, this third of a painting is actually going to need to be much darker. But and for that, I'll probably take some Antwerp or Prussian. The difference between those two blues is one is staining and one isn't. The Antwerp is non-staining. And I will probably mix a little bit of brown matter with that just to gray it down a little bit. Now if you want something really dark, you can use Prussian blue and burnt sienna. That's a little more opaque and it helps cover a little better. And sometimes mixing them on the palette isn't really the best way. Sometimes you should just wet your paper and let it mingle on the paper. And I kind of pick and choose when I allow that to happen. Sometimes it's just a matter of remembering, oh yeah, I should let that do its own thing. And as I'm working, if you have any questions, please be sure and ask. I'd be glad to answer them if I can. What I would like to do is create the effect of this group of trees coming forward and this group of trees receding and having a fairly softened effect of receding here through this area. And one of the things that I will probably do when I get this home is I can always go in and I can gently scratch out a few highlights in the branches and so forth. Alders, and I believe these are probably alders, they look like it to me, tend to have kind of a white appearance against a dark background. We're observers as artists, and so those are the little things that help make a difference. And I'm going to come in here with a little bit of, just a little bit, just to warm this area up. Down around the base.
So that was a little bit of what?
Quinacridone gold.
Okay, thank you.
And I do believe in lifting as you go. And as I work, I'm always thinking, now, okay, I put that color down and maybe it's making it pop too much. I can always go in and cool it down by using the complementary color, which for green would be reddish, red tones. For blues it'd be more orange, orangey tones. Like my favorite colors right now, and actually have been for a while, is burnt orange, quinacridone burnt orange, and quinacridone gold.
Those are two colors that I'm not familiar with, and I think probably a lot of people here aren't. We're kind of beginners.
Okay.
Okay, what would that relate to in your standard palette, where you just have your
Okay,
basic
the
color?
quinacridone gold is very similar to a raw sienna or a yellow ochre, but it's very transparent and it's vibrant. And the burnt orange is probably in the same family as the burnt sienna, only it's a little bit more vibrant and it is more transparent as well. It's the earth tones like your raw sienna and your burnt umber and your burnt sienna and your yellow ochre are settling pigments. They're heavier, they will settle into your paper. Because these right on top, they have a little bit more transparency to them. And I think they're a synthetic watercolor. They're very light fast, which means that they do real well when exposed to light.
Is there a brand that you prefer from the quinacridone color?
You know, the what I'm using is the quinacridone gold. I believe I get that from Winsor Newton, and then the burnt sienna or the burnt orange is Da Vinci, and they vary from company to company. So that was a good question. Some people at other workshops have had those colors and have wondered, well, how come mine's different? It's just, well, same as Payne's Gray from company to company will vary. So, and I don't use tube greens, and sometimes I will use a phthalo green, but most of the time I mix my own greens. And I'm trying to think, most of my browns tend to be, and grays are always, they're not out of the tube. Right now I'm starting to put in some of my darker values, and the thing that about rocks is a lot of times layering is real important. And what layering is, as opposed to wet and wet, is you let it dry. And then after it's dry, you go in and do some more layers on top. Now this creek goes back into the background quite a ways. The thing about about doing water and rocks that are in the water is you're actually doing the water first and figuring out where the water is going to be, and then you're going in and painting the rocks, kind of almost like a negative painting. And if the water's coming down over the rocks, you want to adjust for that and not make it real full, real solid, because you're going to want water going over the top. Now, you can use a mask to do this, and I've gotten to the point where I don't have to use a mask, but you can use a mask, and that will help preserve some of those areas that you need to have light areas going over the top. Or you can go in after you're done and use a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. It just depends on, planning is so important, and I can't stress enough that it's a good idea to plan for your whites, because even going back in and using some of those techniques still make it hard. And if you're using staining paints, you really can't lift as easily. You can't scrub. Is my head still in the way?
Like that, it's fine.
Okay, you need to tell me that.
I will, I'm
Okay.
gonna watch it. Well, the area you're working on, it's been clear.
Okay.
But don't get a stiff neck.
Oh, I won't, but I just don't want to block it, and that's not on my mind right now, so.
Are you using basically the same, I see you only have 4 different brushes, which is pretty nice.
Generally, as a rule, I will paint almost an entire painting with this brush, and I've just gotten used to going up on the tip, and when you're painting moving water, say you're painting a river that's going horizontally or down in front of the paper, you can sometimes get a really nice wave action by going up on the tip and then pressing and then making a thick and thin type of calligraphic type of line. And I always think that we artists a lot of times shortchange ourselves by not practicing enough with our brushes and really have them do more work. And one of the things that, as I've been going to some Watercolor of Oregon critiques, the thing that I keep hearing is that people really like the calligraphic nature of some of my line work. So I don't know, maybe in another life I was a calligrapher or as Oriental or something, I don't know. But I enjoy using the brush. It's my favorite type of tool. Although I do like I do like using pastels, but with pastels you can build up your textures and you can get some real nice calligraphic lines with pastels as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm going in with a kind of blue-gray that is really a combination of using a little bit of permanent rose and a little bit of burnt orange, and then a combination of blues in the family of ultramarine, Prussian, and cerulean. And I used to work, when I did florals, I used to try to keep my palette as clean as possible. And I'm finding that the more landscapes that I do, the less I'm concerned with that. And because I like getting some of the mixtures. And right now I'm basically working my way down the paper, trying to work in some of my shadowy areas. And I'm working fairly light. It's not uh, it's not a full dark value. It's a lighter value, and I will probably, it'll dry lighter, so then I can go in and do some layering. Now, if this was 300 Arches 300 or so forth, something like that, I could go in and do a little bit more work with the spraying. Sometimes you can spray and it will speckle the rocks a little bit. If you want to keep things moist, you can spray. And with the 140, you can also do that. It's just that with the 300, it seems to lend itself a little bit more to some interesting effects. And you know, it starts out feeling fairly monochromatic, and that's okay because you can add other colors to it as you continue the layering process. And I'm dragging my brush a little bit. I think it's Charles Reed that says that dragging the brush is a good tool, a good way to get some nice effects. I've never taken from him, but that's what I heard. I was pushing my brush around the other day, and this lady who had taken a class from him says, "Oh, that's what Charles Reed says." I'm going, "Oh, good, he's getting the big bucks." But you know, it's funny because Dorothy was saying that I've grown a lot with my work, and I'm really glad to say that you never stop growing as an artist. You always have challenges. I think the big difference, Dorothy, I don't know if you agree with this, is that I have a willingness to work it to death, to keep working on it until I get it right. Whereas I think there was a time when I was afraid to ruin it, and I wouldn't work any further. This paper that I'm using, I hear a discussion back there, is Winsor Newton cold press, and I work without stretching my paper most of the time. And if I had to stretch my paper all the time, I probably wouldn't be an artist. It is. I agree with that. Now I just mixed a little bit of burnt orange with a little bit of Prussian blue, and that makes a nice dark. And I'm coming in and I'm just floating in a little bit of my darks along here, and right at the base of these rocks putting in a few darks. Because that's in the background, you would think that maybe you wouldn't want to overladen it with a lot of dark, but I don't know, it works for me on this particular painting. So, and I'm going to come up here and float a little bit of that into.
Have you done this picture before?
This painting is a little bit different, but it's basically this painting right here.
Oh, okay.
You know, you can never make a painting look the same, and it's a good thing because I sell everything, so I don't want people to think I'm selling prints. Whoops. I just put fresh paints in here, and I was mentioning to somebody that I work with my paints being drier, so I have to be careful about how much I'm getting on my brush. You get used to working a certain way, and then you throw a monkey wrench in it. You have to remember. And that needs to be cooled down a little bit or neutralized. So I just grabbed a little bit of rose, and I'm just going to gray that down a little bit. gonna drag. I'm at a point where I can kind of drag that a little bit. Lifting is an important tool. And let's see, coming in with a kind of a neutral brownish color that was a variety of colors. Violet, which was made with blue and permanent rose with a little bit of green and gold thrown in. You really get some beautiful neutrals if you don't rely on the tube. And they're not colors you can get out of a tube. Trying to remember to keep my head up.
You're doing good.
Okay. Now over in this area, there's some little green trees coming out, but I don't. The problem with a painting that's like this, if you throw in a bright green tree, it's just going to shout at you, and you really don't want that to happen. So I'm going to. I keep a little quinacridone gold over here in my greens because I like to mix the quinacridone with a blue to make a nice green, and I'm not dabbing over there with my dark color then. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to just dabble in this little tree. And I'm actually going to grab a little bit of lemon to just brighten it up a little bit. And there's actually a little bit more of that might be back in this area here. So. Now for the thing about these rocks is that they really have a nice, I know that some of it's probably the photograph, but I like the blue tones to the rocks. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to go ahead and cover that with a light wash of cerulean.
Earlier you mentioned potatoes and rocks.
Uh-huh.
What is it that you do so that your rocks will not look like potatoes?
Well, it's really hard sometimes because rocks sometimes really do look like potatoes. And so my suggestion, what I have done is I've really practiced drawing different kinds of rocks. And I try to remember that they are a geometrical form and that there's different planes and angles to them, and that with shadows and texture, texture is very important. You can create a sense that they have imperfections. Although I have seen some very wrinkled and imperfect potatoes. But I think it's just a matter of practicing. Really, it takes a lot of work to work at it. It's not something that just happens.
I will be your witness. That is difficult.
Good. I'm glad you're validating that. It's not. You would think it would be really easy, but it's just not. Now, what I've done is I'm actually going to switch to one of my more beat up brushes, which I love. And I'm actually going to feather a little bit of cerulean, mostly a cerulean based color, and I'm going to put some of the color of the water around these rocks over in here. coming down over the rocks too. So, and the farther back the water is, the bluer or grayer it might take on an appearance. So, and water follows the contour of the rocks. There actually is rhyme and reason to it. You sometimes don't think there is, but there is.
Who's the maker of your brushes?
I use, I keep saying for the last 20 years I should be getting a royalty for this,
Mhm.
but I use Richardson 9000 series, and I like that series because they hold a lot of water, they have a good tip on it, you can do a very fine line with a full brush, and they last. I'm a prolific painter, so they're inexpensive. They last me for a couple of years, and then I replace them all. But I always save my old brushes because sometimes I go teach children at a camp or something like that, and it's nice for them to have fairly decent brushes to work with. And a lot of times if I go to a woman's camp or retreat, and I teach a workshop, I use the good brushes then. So for them, it's nice. It's a real treat. A lot of people don't understand that good paper and good brushes are real important to feeling successful about your work. So what I just did was I went in and softened the edge of that rock a little bit there with a light wash, and it's still a little damp, so it's kind of running. The farther back, it seems like you'd think it should be a hard edge there where the water meets the rocks, but it doesn't have to be. It's actually more believable if it's not. And I'm just, again, going back into this back area. I want it to be white, but not stark white. It'll still read fairly bright. And it's almost a triadic palette that I'm using of a warm color and then two cools. The cools might vary. I might vary which ones they are, but it's made up mostly of about 3 colors. Now I'm just reaching over here and I'm grabbing a little brown matter, and I'm going to see what happens when I add a little phthalo green and a little bit of ultramarine blue to it. Now all your phthalo colors are staining, so that means that once you put them down you won't be able to lift them in entirety. So you want to be able to be sure where you're going to put them and what you're going to be using them for. So, and what I'm doing over here is I'm just trying to bring this group of rocks forward. I'll probably be making these just a little bit darker back here to make them recede a little bit more. This area back in here a little bit. Is my head in the way?
Not now.
So am I supposed to listen for that little okay.
No, sometimes it's covering part of the paper, but it's the white part that you're not painting on. So,
Oh, okay.
so far we're doing pretty good.
Okay. So what I just did was I went in with a little bit more dark, that green and brown matter, and ultramarine blue makes a nice neutral gray. Oh, not neutral, it's really kind of dark actually. neutral's the wrong word to describe this. Sometimes we're afraid of really dark darks, and I think it's a sign of growing as a watercolorist when you finally get to that point where you're mixing some nice dark darks and you're using them. Well, I make little noises when I
I was
paint.
just thinking about that when you did that. I was gonna say, hey,
Somebody else does that, huh?
yeah.
Okay, I warmed that up just a little bit, and I'm coming over here and I just dried off my brush a little bit because I want to blend that in a little bit. There. There's still a few trees type shapes back in the background that but I don't want them to be real obvious. The way I lightened that up was I just took more water and a little bit more of the quinacridone burnt orange and lightened it up just a little bit. Warmed it up too. Temperature is real important. A lot of people forget that temperature and values are really what makes your painting work.
Judy, ask.
What?
We had a conversation here Sunday, and we were focusing on a particular artist, and in his article, he used the word or the phrase tonal balance. And my thought is that different artists use different words for the same thing. And so we were trying to figure out what he meant. What would you think?
Tonal balance.
What does tonal mean?
I don't know. When I think of tone, sometimes I think of loud and quiet, but that could be achieved either through temperature or value, or a variety of that. So there's my political answer.
Fantastic.
Great political.
Are you familiar with Joseph's or Bookfetch's work?
No.
He's on the cover of this month's, of the June.
Watercolor Magic?
Uh-huh.
It's that real light, it's a almost monochromatic, is it?
There's a lot of water in the foreground
Well, we
and a
did-
pale sky,
Is it
and then
Venice?
this wonderful, dark, kind of vague
It's a picture
city.
of Venice.
Huh. I glanced at it at the art store the other day, but I wasn't attracted enough to it to buy it. But I would just say that has to do with good design and finding balance with the elements that you're using, whether it's value or color or a variety. There's my second political answer.
You threw in the kitchen sink. and
I did, you know.
All bases are covered.
All bases are covered. I think it's open for interpretation.
Yeah, and we got kind of the same answer when we talked to Audie. Did you, Judy? Uh-huh.
Oh, good, I'm glad I'm right up there, that's good. You know, one of the things that I would really stress if you're just beginning or you're mid-career or wherever, you can always review the elements of design, and it never hurts to reacquaint yourself with those things and to try to, you have your elements, then you have your principles, and don't ask me to recite them all, but some of the elements are like texture, value, color, line, and shape. And then for your principles, you have things like unity, harmony, rhythm, movement, repetition, and there might be a couple I've forgotten. But those are all really important things, and often we forget that those are important to think about. And I know that somebody here may be judging in a show soon, and in the case of that, in that case, those are the things that you pay attention to. The content should be last, in my opinion. Personal content is important, and how it's expressed. But if you've got a lot of really great paintings that have a lot of really good personal content in them, then you fall back on the elements of design and the principles to make sure that that will help you decide what's, I think, in my case, that when I've judged, that's what I always fall back on are those
Would
basics.
you care to write all that down?
I don't know if you have the book in here, but there's a book by Nita Leland called The Creative Artist, and she has a very wonderful chapter on all the elements and principles of design. So if you don't have it here, I'll be glad to, but I think you could even probably go to her website, or if you have a library, it might be at the library. But I would be glad to help you out with that. I'm sure I forgot some.
What was the name of the artist again?
Nita Leland.
NITA.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about content, would that, like what you're painting now is content, like water and trees?
Right, right. And, I remember one year when I was judging a show, I'm just going to go in and lift that. It got a little bit dark. I'm going to soften it a little bit. I remember one year when I was judging a show, there was a lot of really excellent artists in the professional category, but there was one that was just very unique, and she chose a subject that was real unusual, and it was kind of an abstract painting based on crop circles. And that was when crop circles were kind of new in the news, and it was hard to choose. I finally chose her because it was a unique subject, but well done.
So would you say that emotional response should come over technical perfection?
Well, and I don't know. I think that actually it's maybe creativity. Finally, you look at it and say, well, is this a real creative way of expressing this subject, and does it work? Does it work as far as structure?
I've seen some that were very technically perfect, but they didn't do anything for me.
Well, but you see, I guess that there's a certain element when you're a judge that you have to find something that speaks to you in an exciting way too. But I always, when it comes down to debating, now you're going. Okay. When you come down to debating, you have to be more obvious than that, Chuck. Especially when especially when somebody's picking my brain, I have none left.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt.
You were interrupting. That's okay, though. It worked.
While you're explaining, I hate to sound ignorant, but what do you mean by temperature is important?
Okay, temperature. It's relative, first of all. So it depends on what it's next to. You can have 3 blues, and one blue will lean more towards the greens, and some will lean more towards the reds. And so how do you decide whether it's leaning towards a red is warmer than leaning towards a green? I usually think of yellow as warmer, and so I would choose the green, the blue that had more green in it, as a warmer color. But if you put that same green blue next to something that's got even more yellow in it, or something that's toned down with some gold or whatever, it could seem cooler. So it's a relative thing. It's what you put it next to. Temperature is important. Sometimes you can use temperature to make things recede or come forward. Well, I don't have a good example here today, but sometimes I've reversed that and used the cooler colors. I have darker colors down in the bottom and smaller branches, which is kind of a reversal of what you would think in order to make it recede. but you can reach a certain point where you can break rules. So, but you can use temperature to make things recede or come forward. If you put yellow anywhere, your eye automatically goes to yellow.
I think your last picture over there is a good example. You've got warm rocks in the foreground and a
Yeah.
cool forest in the background.
Good, thank you.
Oh,
For
okay,
that.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that, it's fun because out where I live, we have the O'Brien rocks, which are reddish brown. They're full of iron. And then you go down towards the Smith and you have the serpentine, which is a lot greener. So, okay, now to get to some water, what I did over here is I'm starting to build up some of my rocks, which are my container. And over in this area, I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue, which is a blue that leans towards the greens. And I'm going to mix just a little bit of burnt orange with that. And there's a darker area, actually.
Prussian and phthalo both opaque or not transparent?
Prussian, I think, leans more towards the transparent. It's not, but when you mix it with like a burnt sienna, then it becomes more settling. As long as it rides on the surface, then it's more transparent. Was that a trick question?
Good answer.
How come you don't ever have to step back from your paintings to see what you have?
I do. I in my studio, I'll put them away and look at them, and it's real important, actually. It's kind of myopic. Is myopic the right word? It feels myopic when I sit here and do this for you guys because I'm not really getting a chance to look back. Although if I look up at my paper,
Yeah, it really shows.
it helps a little bit, but then I don't have my glasses on. So where the water has settled into this little pool right here, I'm going to take a little bit of my greenish gray mixture, and I always touch the tip of my brush. Am I out of the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to touch it a lot, actually. And I'm just going to drag this across this area. And leaving some white sparkle. And I'm going to just draw down a little bit where it's coming down over the rocks.
If you lose some of your white there, are you gonna go back and lift it? Is that how you're gonna reclaim it?
You could lift it, or you could scrape it with an X-Acto knife.
I got a notion that Debbie Dawson doesn't have to do much of that.
Well, sometimes I'm lucky. But I've been doing water quite extensively for the last few months, and I don't even use mask much anymore. But I have some techniques which I'll be sharing in my workshop on using
Oh, good.
mask.
Water is tough.
I think your workshop is full, is it not?
I
Yes.
believe it is. We'll just,
And you're not gonna make it bigger.
huh?
Don't
No.
make it bigger.
No, I'm not going to make it bigger.
Just gotta do more.
There you go. Well, unless the gas gets up to $5 a gallon, well, actually $4 is hard on the pocketbook.
They
I'm-
should be up to $5 by next month.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
That's
I'm
funny.
going.
It's not funny.
It's not funny, no.
No.
Yes, she did. She's gonna do it right.
Okay. Now, in order for this to make sense, this little shelf that I just painted in, I've got to paint some darks in there. So I'm going to take a little bit of the Prussian blue again, and I'm going to add it to this mixture with a little bit of, just a little bit of rose. And that's going to make a nice dark gray. And I'm going to come in and, if I don't screw it up. You know, even though I've been painting a long time, there's still those moments where you think, okay, I could lose it. But, like I was saying earlier, I'm in a place where I'm more willing to try to fix it and to work with it than I was maybe a few years ago. So not giving up on your painting. Set it aside if you have to. And it's like I had a group of people come to my studio the other day, just like 12 of them stopped in, and they were asking me different things. Where was I going with that? I don't know. What was I talking about? Fixing things. We were talking about, thanks, Chuck.
We're not going to damn you.
Anyway, talking about fixing things, and when they asked me, you know, how long have you worked on this painting? And I said, well, that painting really took me about a year, not working on it all at once, but, you know, setting it aside and looking at it and taking it out of the frame. There's been many times when I've framed things and then looked at them for 6 months and took them out and fixed them. You know, it's always kind of fun to see if you can improve on something.
A sure way to do that is after you favor the giclée and then unframe it and do it.
That would be hard. That would be really
Every
difficult.
time.
So
It's a different picture than that.
So my little gimmick that I have is I don't do giclées. I just do originals. So I'm glad I haven't had to deal with that. A little bit more Prussian blue, a little bit of the rose, and a little bit of phthalo green to make my gray. I'm actually going to add a little bit of burnt umber to it too, or not burnt umber, I don't use burnt umber, brown matter to just grade out a little bit more. Okay, these rocks down here, in order to paint the rest of the creek, I have to come in and get busy on those. Sometimes I find painting my dark sides of my rocks the easiest. Kind of helps me set the tone for the rest. But you know, it's not really about my formula or my way of working. It's each of you owe it to yourself to develop your own approach. And I think that's kind of what's exciting for me right now, is I'm at a place where a lot of my work, I feel, is starting to come into really being my work. And not just, you know, I had somebody, when I was painting this, I go to a group on Mondays where we paint, and somebody said, oh, that's so Zabo-ish. And
You
So-
trapped him.
So what?
Zabo-ish.
Oh.
Zabo.
Yeah.
And actually, he's one of my heroes, but I would hope that by now, you can take what people teach you and then translate it into your own thing. it kind of actually, in a lot of ways, felt good because I do admire the man. But
What I really like is when they say, oh, it's so wonderful, looks just like a photograph.
yeah, I know. You know, it seems like a lot of people really want to see you paint realism, and I think it's important to not get totally hung up on that. Some of my best paintings, I feel, are more of a personal interpretation, and sometimes that is just more abstract in some ways. Although I did an abstract down here a few weeks ago, and
What'd you do with that?
I'm still working on it. I've been telling jokes about it, though. I've been telling everybody that Doris called Judy up and said, come down here, Deborah Dawson is painting an abstract and she's done it in 30 minutes. And then I finish it up by saying, and of course at the end they said I ruined it in 5. But, you know, it's kind of funny. I thought it was kind of funny. And it was fun. It was something I just don't do a lot of, but every once in a while I get bored with.
How can you ruin an abstract?
It got a little muddy.
Well, actually, when I got it out in the light at home, I didn't think it was muddy in that much. There was some areas that I went and bought some white paint. And that's the fun thing about doing an abstract, is that you can work on it. It's problem solving, actually.
To go back to what you said about your favorite painting, you said your best, one of your best paintings, or some of your best, or something or other. Is your public following also in agreement as to what your best are?
Yeah, that's hard because a lot of my last year I have some collectors up north that collect new paintings from me every year, just about, and I was mentioning that I thought I was going to try to go off in a little bit different direction. Why? Why are you going to do that? Don't do that. You know, and so you have to weigh. I think creativity should always win over, though. There's always room for more collectors. You know, you can always.
When you start getting bored with it, it's time to change.
It really is. I mean, if you can't do something and enjoy it, then why are you doing it? That's not what your whole purpose is. So, I'm dragging my brush along here just to get some of that layering that's going on in those rocks. And I may homogenize that a little bit more back there. I got a line going there. Would you mind holding this up for me so that I can see it? There. It's that distance thing. And it helps with the glasses too. Okay.
This way, this way.
And when you're looking up here too, and me looking down here, it's just totally different perspective.
Okay. So.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is a different perspective.
Okay. Right now I'm trying to get some of the forms in so that I can work with them later. If you use a light color to help put in some of those forms, then you can go back and build them up later, but it just kind of helps, you know, where you're at and what you're doing. I like not knowing what I'm doing sometimes, but most of the time I like to have a fair idea.
Being me and painting then.
It takes a lot of patience, doesn't it, too?
You know, everybody said that, but I think I have a couple people that I paint with on Mondays over in Cave Junction area, and they're the kind of people that like to be able to paint the whole thing wet, and that's fine. But then they wonder, how come I can do this and do this and do that? And I say, well, you have to slow down and dry it, let it dry in between. And so it just depends on what you want for your outcome. If you want it to look a certain way, then you have to explore maybe trying some new techniques, be willing to try some new techniques. That's a little green. I'm going to take some cerulean blue because I don't want to get into the green so much yet. But I want to create a bridge in tone right there because there was a lot of contrast. Contrast is another principle of design, I believe, or else it's an element, one of those two. I used to go to a junior high every year and give a discussion or talk, a show about what the principles of design are for the photography students, and it was fun. It was interesting to do that.
Do you bring your paintings when you do that?
Yeah, but a lot of it was, I'm just going in with a little water right here because that dark that was at the bottom there needed to be softened even more. So, yeah, I always took in examples of the principles and the elements. Now there's a little shelf of rocks. Let me put this here for a second. As you can see this right here, the thing to realize is that water, the formation of what the water is doing on top is due to the formation of the rocks underneath. And so what I need to do now is to create the illusion. And that's what artists are, is illusionists.
Do you work a lot from photographs?
Actually, over the last couple of years before this last year, I was relying a lot on my digital camera. But I'm at a point now, because I don't have a computer, where I'm really getting back into doing the sketching. And I didn't realize how much I was missing that. And so I think before anybody goes to work with their digital right there, that they should do some sketching too. Because I don't care how good of a photographer you are, it's not going to be perfect. You've got to do some adjusting on the piece to make it a good composition, or to simplify something, or to change something a little bit.
Well, the sketching too makes you more familiar with what you're going to be doing.
It does. Yes, that's a really good point. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking a kind of a gray-green, and I'm laying in a little bit of that shelf of rocks here, and I'm doing it very lightly with dragging my brush. It's almost dry brush technique. It is a dry brush technique. And if you look at water, sometimes it's darker right at the base of the fall before it turns into foam. Sometimes it's darker just in front of that. Other times sometimes it seems like it's darker at the top. And so it's really important to use your observation skills to decide. Seems like shorter little riffles have a little bit more of a contrast there. This one is obviously a winter stream. How much time do I have?
All day.
You always say that when I come over. You always say that.
I think we're over an hour now.
Are we?
Did it run out?
No? Tape's good for about an hour and 20 minutes, I think.
Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm coming along these rocks and I'm softening the edges a little bit with a light wash. And is this still in where you're seeing it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You haven't heard that.
No, that's true. I haven't. So I'm just. This trick is to do it very lightly because you can always get it darker later. But if you do it lightly first, then you can go in and you can change it. So I'm taking a little bit of cerulean blue, wiping most of it off my towel, and looking at the photograph and the rocks. I'm coming in and I'm trying to draw a little bit of put in a little bit of the color of how it's going over the rocks a little bit. And you can exaggerate. There's a lot of things that you can do as an artist. You can, and I think with water, it's real important that you do learn to exaggerate a little bit. I have white spots bugging me. There. Okay, and I'm going to bring this down. Okay, so I'm basically going in and putting shadows. Lifting if I need to.
Will you please bring this painting back for your workshop?
Yes, I will. Definitely. I think I have a buyer for that one up there already, but I'm sure she'll let me hang on to it.
Which one?
This one right here. So I'm just dry brushing a little bit and lifting, scrubbing a little bit. I think finding a nice balance between hard and soft edges with water is the hard thing, but you definitely have some darks if you're working with shallower water, and you definitely start seeing more of the glass-like qualities where you have a variety of reflections, and some of them are really dark. Okay, I just took my favorite combination again. This is really a fairly monochromatic painting, and I'm coming in and I'm just doing a few darks on this shelf here to make it look solid like it might be rock.
And what was that favorite combination?
It's Prussian and burnt orange and a little bit of green maybe. And you know, as long as you use a red, a blue, and a green, you'll get a gray. And just depending on which of those you use is which gray you're going to get. And some of them are real similar, so it's.
What green are you using though? You said you.
I use a little bit of the phthalo on a very small scale, or it's really one of my favorite greens is a little bit of ultramarine blue. And a little bit of, let me show you this, a little bit of the quinacridone gold. It makes a nice dark green. So, a nice rock color. I think getting at least 3 or 4 values on a rock is important.
Which green is it that you use with the gold?
Actually, I use, when I mix my green, I use ultramarine blue or Prussian blue with the gold, and that makes a nice green. Yeah, just a sec here.
The colors are so much better on the actual painting.
Only fair is fair, so hold it for me, please. Okay. I think the thing that makes this painting work besides the composition of the water is that area at the top of the river where it is soft and it looks like it recedes back in. It's real important. And the top half of the creek should actually probably be more gray or blue than white, and that will help it recede a little bit.
Have you ever went up to the headwaters of the Rogue and isn't that wonderful up there?
It's beautiful.
It's just beautiful.
Yes, up at the Natural Bridge area, yeah. Definitely. Okay, just to kind of anchor this whole thing, I'm gonna, whoops. That's my favorite word.
Anchors.
Whoops. Yeah. And actually, I'm just gonna.
Right now, you're trying to keep the water from going off the paper.
You should see my white tables are not white. And I'm actually going to warm the top of this rock a little bit. I just am using a little bit more of my warmer tones there. Okay. I think I should probably cover the rest of this in my workshop.
So that means you're not gonna touch it until you bring it back.
Yeah.
Deborah, it looks like your first workshop on the first is pretty full. Would you be interested in anybody that wants, if we can get enough for the next day to have, the ones that couldn't sign up for the first one?
Sure, sure. What I might do, since I'm keeping my prices really low on the workshop, is put a kitty out for gas money,
Okay.
if that'd be okay. So, huh? I know, but I want people to be able
So
to
that would
come.
be May 2nd then?
Okay,
for the
that's a
second.
Friday, right?
I'll have.
I think it is a Friday.
Yes,
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 it
it
is. So if
Okay.
anybody's interested that's not on that first one, she'll have the second one, May 2nd.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to do that.
And you're gonna come to both.
Yeah, I'm coming to both.
Okay, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead and,
I'm gonna film some of your.
okay.
Very nice.
Oh, I know, that will be at the workshop. Finishing touches.
And we have two. Now Debbie's is full, but you can wait list.
Oh, and you didn't hear when you stepped out of the room.
What?
We asked if she would come back on the 2nd and do a second class for those that weren't able to sign up on the 1st.
Okay.
She said she would,
Fabulous.
so,
And then the other art class is Audie Steps. Where is that?
29th of May.
And then we have John, Dr. Hewitt, which is the day after our 4th of July festivities, the 5th of July. Wide open.
Are you a member of our?
No,
Can I stay seated?
There's our photographer, our artist of the day is Debbie Dawson,
Very nice.
right there. And the piece that she was painting is very similar to this one here on the wall.
And you could, maybe do something with this special, to make it, you know,
Before you get this one, why don't you come over a little bit so that you can really get it?
You know,
It's
I
been
almost,
suggested that the photographer move so he can really get it. So he is moving.
Come on now, move.
do you have a supply list for your workshop? I'm very, it's very easy. Are you watercolors?
No, I mean, I have paints and brushes and paper.
Okay.
I have wash and water-based.
Okay, as long as you have transparent watercolors, I can teach you almost anything with any color. So, and then I can have a supply list there for colors that during the workshop you might want to pick up. With it only being a week away, I doubt that you could get them unless you went to Medford.
I'm not going to Medford.
Right, so whatever you have, just bring, and we can make it work.
Okay, I'm real interested in getting some of the Windsor colors that you have. Is that what this is?
Yeah, most of my paints tend to be either Da Vinci or Winsor Nude. And, but there's whole beans are great, you know, whatever you have.
I'll just bring what I have for the moment.
And I can even, I'd be willing to sit down with you and talk about your palette, what you might need
Oh, good.
at that time.
What I need.
Okay.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your demonstration.
You're welcome, thank you.
Debbie, you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Debbie, does it say transparent